Okay, so we're here today with Kathi Dunn to share some tales of Treasure Island and the surrounding area. And why don't we start, Kathi, with first where you were born and how you managed to come to this area and a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was born in Key West. My mom and dad met there. My dad's parents had a congregational church in Key West, and my mom, her family were there with the naval station. And they met, and I was married, and 6 weeks after I was born, they went to Maine, where my dad went to seminary. So then from there, he became a minister. He had a church in Georgia, New Smyrna Beach, Florida, and then in 1961, he came to Church by the Sea in Madeira Beach. He was there for 30 years. So I was going into the 9th grade at that time, so I grew up quite a bit on the beaches.
Tell us about that. What school you went to?
I went to Madeira Beach Middle School, or junior high, so it was
right.
then, and started 9th grade, and at that time met a lot of kids. The beaches were just an amazing place to grow up, from kids from St. Pete Beach, Treasure Island, Madeira, and Redington all went there, and so we ventured from one end of the beaches to the other. Went to the beach theater, the Treasure Island. I think there were dances at the, I wasn't sure if it was called the suntan dances, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a big spot, and we couldn't drive then, but everybody had boyfriends from Pass-a-Grille and Redington, and we hit that, but it was nice.
It really was like one big community.
It
Now,
was.
every city has its own thing, but it was almost like one gigantic city, wasn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah. It was
Kids
so
didn't have
easy.
cars, but they had boats. So
There you go.
little tiny boats, and we did live on the water.
And you lived in Madeira Beach?
Madeira Beach.
Uh-huh. And where were you there on Madeira? When you lived there?
140th Normandy, and it was the parsonage for Church by the Sea. So.
And how did you get to the school? Was it a school bus that came out, or did y'all have to be dropped
Yes,
off?
it was a school bus.
It was a school bus.
Yes.
So that school bus did the whole beaches then? For
Several
the
different-
There was Gulf beaches.
Right.
Oh, so that was
Yes.
elementary,
Mhm.
though. Yeah,
Yes,
for
Gulf
junior
Beach is
high.
elementary. My brothers went to Gulf Beaches.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then the junior high had to be Madeira Beach.
Yes.
That's right. And what about the high school?
Well, in 9th grade, we all were looking forward to go to Dixie Hollins because that was the cool school at that time. Although our friends from Johns Pass South were all zoned for bogey, which was kind of traumatic. Seminole High School was invented, and no one knew where Seminole was, or now all of a sudden we're going to become Warhawks and have orange and green as our colors, and nobody wanted to go
Wow,
there.
that was a big change, wasn't it?
But it was fun. I mean, it was nice, and we still stayed connected to our beach friends. People from the mainlands went to Seminole, so our friendships expanded. But we still kept those beach friends, which I still have today.
So you kept up with your friends, and so you hung out somewhat on that the north end of Treasure Island, I understand?
Oh
You
yes.
were friends with the Rice family? Tell us about that.
Cece Rice was in my class in Madeira, and I wasn't real close to him. He was more of a guy, and I became a cheerleader. He was kind of into fishing, and so but we've known each other for all these years, and the Powell family, and Seminole wasn't that large, so everyone knew everyone that went to that high school.
Now, how did you connect with the Powell family? Was that through the middle school as well?
The middle school and the high school, and we all just kind of had classes together, and weekends were hanging out different places on the beach. So.
And the Powells, they own our villa
Yes.
on Treasure Island. Did you go out there at all?
I did not,
Okay.
no.
And they didn't live there, I'm sure. That was just a business for them.
Right. Some of my closer friends, they were hanging out with the Powell, and some of the guy friends and all, but.
And did you, when you hung out with or knew Cece, did you ever go to like the restaurant, Gators?
Oh yes,
and any of that?
yes.
Did you meet any of his family?
I did. Agnes, his mother, and Sid, yes. And through the years, we've had our high school graduation and reunions. He's always been a part of that, and took the whole class out on a party boat
Is that right?
and at the restaurant. So we stayed connected, until he died, yes.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about your dad and about the Church by the Sea and where it started.
Okay. Well, in the 1940s, the beaches were pretty sparse. So fishermen, and in Reddington there were some houses that were being built. Many of the people on in St. Pete would come out and have cottages on the weekend, but then they would go home by boat to go back to St. Pete to go to church. So there was a group of fishermen in Treasure Island and Madeira, what was Madeira, Mitchell's Beach then, and Reddington. So we really need a church. We had St. John's, and I think in Indian Rocks there was another church. But so they said, we really need a church out here on the beaches so we can keep these tourists from going back home. So there was a retired minister, Philip Ralph, and he was in his late 70s. And he says, well, I'm retired, I'll come out and see if I can start a church. He would go up and down the beaches, knock on doors and say, you know, if we start a church, would you and your family come to it? Couldn't find a place except for the Fishermen's Union Hall. And it was a little old bar, I believe it was around 126th Avenue in Treasure Island. And so he was an amazing man. He would talk to anyone. I didn't know him, obviously, but those that knew him. And he talked them into letting them borrow the bar on Sunday. So they would have to get there early, take all the beer bottles out of the bar, sweep it out. There's one of the people in our church at one time that said his job was to sweep out all the beer bottles and everything, get it ready for church. Then they borrowed an organ and had it there. There was a jar on the bar, I guess, and that was for people to donate to try to get the money going to find a church. So that started, and they said when it rained, the rain would come in and they had to scoot over and, you know, get away from the raindrops. And in the summer it was very hot. So that went on for several weeks, I suppose, until they started getting enough money to try to find a place for the church. Well, the Fisherman Union Hall on Saturday night was, of course, the bar, and then to get ready for church the next morning, they hired a young guy, Leon Atkinson, $2 a month, that would sweep out the place and get it ready, sweep out the beer bottles, get it all cleaned up for church the next morning. There were just benches, and we had like 20 kids at first, and that was the very first services that were there. Then that grew until they just busted out the walls, and but they had an organ that they borrowed, of course, from the bar, and then a jar on the bar that would be where they would start putting their pennies and nickels and to get ready, try to find a place for a church. At the time, it was the war going on, and many of the families would put an offering in because their soldier, their family, came home safely. So they started doing that as a collection to find a place. At the time, the people in Reddington did not want the church to be on the south side of John's because they were kind of partial to the fishermen, on the other hand, in Treasure Island, wanted it to be on the south side. So at the time, the only place that they could find a piece of property was in this Mitchell's Beach, and I believe it was $331.51. They found their first sand to build the church on.
And that's where the present church is.
Well, that's the beginning of it. Of course, it's grown and the plots and so forth.
Kathy, did you ever hear who owned that building, the original building on Treasure
No, I
Island?
have not.
Like that?
No, I've gone by it many times to see if there's even just a portion of it. You know,
Is there
to see.
something?
I have not seen anything. I've never stopped to look, but I always try to think. You know, what did it look like at that time?
And we have heard something about a pot stove they had
Yes.
inside there.
Yes.
And that was in the winter.
Because in the winter it was very damp. The water came through the roof, and but this Leon had to get that all ready during the winter. And then summer there was no air conditioning, obviously, and it was very warm and mosquitoes.
And then there was a small restaurant next door,
Okay.
which is in your
Yes,
picture that you so
yes.
graciously gave us. I think it's Connie's
Yes.
Snack Shack.
Uh-huh.
And it's just a terrific photo. We're so grateful.
Thank you.
And where they have that it's in your archives at your presentation?
Yes, it is. We have many albums of the church history, and we found these albums. They were getting ready to, actually my dad's office, and someone found just big scrapbooks of photos, and my mom and I, she was alive at the time, we took them and scanned them, preserved them, and started trying to dig into the history and to preserve it for their archives there.
Wow. So just tell us, I know it's Madeira Beach, but a little bit about how they got going up there and
The church?
how you expanded. I know it's a very successful church now.
And well, when Philip Ralph was there, then he was a carpenter by trade as well, and his goal was to have that church as the center of the beaches, not just Madeira, but all the beaches. So his goal was to have activities going on for children and family. So instead of building the church, the huge sanctuary first, they built a little parlor and with a fireplace, and that's where they started having, the growing. And fishermen came. As the church grew, they started putting cinder blocks. Fishermen put anchors inside the cinder blocks to weigh it down. So we've never had, they've stood up. They would have what was called wiring Sunday, where everybody would bring pieces of electrical cord. So they would bring them together, splice them together. Years later, as people were trying to do some updating of electrical, they'd say, "What is this?" So it was a God thing that had never burned down. The walls are much bigger, and many of them are not straight because the people on the beaches did the building of the beaches of the church there. And
Volunteers, probably, right?
Volunteers, and one Sunday they would come in and they would build the shell of the church itself, and I think there's pictures there. And so the next week, maybe there would be a couple of windows added. So everybody did, because at the same time, many of the men were away in the service at that time. So the fishermen were the main workers there. So it was a good thing. Yeah.
And how long did it take for the whole church to get to where it is today?
Today, well, my dad came in 1961, and up until that time, Philip Ralph, he was 80-some years old. There's still hanging in the church chandeliers that he built when he was there.
Wow.
And another story was that they were trying to put the roof on the church, and there was a lumber company in Seminole that brought the lumber to the church, and he was up in his 80s hammering in the lumber. And they said, "Well, what about paying for this?" And he says, "Well, let me call somebody of our church, and maybe he can give us his full year's tithing for this." And the lumber company says, "Oh, we'll pay for it."
Wow.
So but that was one of those things. And many stories like that. But his son was also a minister, Robbins Ralph. So Reverend Robbins Ralph came as he got a little more elderly, and he was a minister there for a while. Then there was another minister after that before my dad came. So he was there for 30 years.
Wow. And where were you all living at that time? Were you still?
In the Deer Beach.
You were still in
he
Deer
was
Beach?
there.
Okay, so you stayed there the whole time?
Pretty much. I, graduated from Seminole, went to junior college, went to Florida State, got married. I became a teacher. I taught at Sunshine Elementary,
You did?
Gulf Beaches Elementary.
Oh.
So it was like a full circle coming back to
Do you have
where-
some pictures of the old school down there?
Sunshine?
Yeah.
I have a class picture,
Oh, that'd be
in my
neat to have.
class.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful
When you were the
school.
teacher?
Yes, I was fourth grade teacher.
Oh, man, I might have seen that picture.
That was probably in,
what year?
70,
1970?
70, 71 maybe.
Now, that was the brick building right across from what is now the St. Pete Yacht Club building,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
It
And
was.
and they took it out and made the houses.
Yes.
That's a shame.
And the library had just storybook characters, all, I mean, it was a very old, it was, and we were 2 blocks from the beach, so,
Sure.
you know, the kids say, okay, you want some recess time? And we would walk over and get some shells and come back. It was a nice, I was there for a year. And my husband and I went, he was stationed in Panama in the Canal Zone. So I taught there, we came back, and I guess after we came back, I taught at Gulf Beaches.
Okay.
And
And what years do you think you were at Gulf Beaches?
I was there 72 and 73 was my, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, that Sunshine Beach, that building, that was
School.
really an incredible,
Yeah.
incredible building. Everybody was just devastated when that went
Yes.
down, really. How, what a lot of history was involved with that.
Oh,
Yeah.
And did you teach a certain class?
I taught 4th grade.
4th grade?
Uh-huh.
So everything?
Yes.
English, math, there was nothing separate that
No.
time, was there? You were fourth
And a
grade.
lot of the kids that you still hear their names and their family names in the beaches were at that school because it was very small. And I think at the time too, there was spring training for baseball players, so a lot of those kids came.
Oh,
And
so
they
some
were in
of
my
the ball
class.
players'
Yes,
children
the ball
would come.
players' kids.
Oh, I'd never heard that before.
Yeah.
You remember anybody in particular? Had you ever heard anybody?
No, I
famous?
wasn't, you know, the Altons, I think, was a big name on the beach, and a couple of other family names, but that's a long time ago.
Yeah. So when you were living in Madeira, and was there any place in particular that you all would go? Restaurants or bars
Madeira?
or even here, Treasure Island, just when you
Oh,
were
well,
the
there
whole
was
beach
the,
area?
up and down. I mean, we still see a lot of the, oh my goodness, right there in Treasure Island, and first that was the main big restaurant. Our family would always go there. I can't remember the name now, but.
Navigator?
Navigator, Careless Navigator, and that was a big
That was,
going
wasn't
out
it?
to dinner
It
place
was,
for my
yes.
family,
Right.
yeah. And of course, the Cajun Diner in Madeira was a big hangout,
Love that
but,
place.
and there were other, you know, weren't too many restaurants that I can remember that we could either, I worked at Mr. H. It's Mr. H. Diner on 140th, that was in Madeira Beach. Kids hang, oh, goodness, it was a dance place, and it was right at 150th where they had dances.
Skips?
And
Was that
Chubby
Skips?
Checkers or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, and they tore that down some time ago.
There used to be a somewhat famous, I don't want to say stripper because this was before, Go-Go Girls.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
No.
Oh, that was right there on that downtown Madeira. I had
I
thought
think
about
that
for
probably
years.
was the
That's probably
same
the place
place,
you're talking about.
because it was,
There was a
yeah,
famous, kind of a
Yes.
famous go-go girl
big
there.
white wooden building where the snack shack is now. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some dances there.
Did you come down here to the Penguin? Did you do the
Yes.
Sunset Beach
Oh,
Penguin
yes.
thing? Everybody did that, didn't they?
Yes, that was a prom night thing.
Was it?
I think, yes, it was, yeah.
Really? That's where y'all had your,
Well, you know, it was a fancy,
it was?
Yeah,
Oh,
it
absolutely.
was,
Yeah, no
yes.
doubt. Oh, yeah.
That restaurant was written up in all sorts of Bon Appetit magazine and the best prime rib on the
Oh,
west coast
man.
of Florida.
The
yeah.
king cut, the queen cut, that's how you,
Yes.
remember Winston driving around on that little cart?
No, I,
And you'd have the, you probably weren't paying any
No.
attention. Now we look, I probably would, now you look back and go, oh,
Yeah.
that's really cool. And how about, where do you live now? Kathy, where do you live?
I live in Seminole.
Okay, you're in
Yes.
Seminole. And you're still connected with your church, I'm sure?
Yes.
You still go to church by the sea?
And we just, I think I was saying, we just purchased a place in Reddington Shores. We sail, we have a sailboat, so now
Nice.
we're torn between the beach and Seminole, whether we're gonna go back and forth.
Oh.
But we have a lot of friends that have grown up with all these years, you know. We just celebrate Tom was there at our 50th high school reunion from Seminole.
And where'd y'all have it?
We had it at the Doubletree, and
Okay.
also at one of our classmates' houses on the beach in Madeira. And,
And so Powell, one of the Powell boys, he was in your class?
yes, Tom.
And that was Tom. And Tom was,
We call him Tommy.
well, of course you did.
It's still hard to call him Tom.
Right. And was he the youngest? No.
I believe so. There was a picture that, and he said he has a lot of photographs, but.
Right, there was the five brothers.
And they're all dressed in the same cute little shirt.
Are they?
You know? Yes.
Yeah, that was, and they owned, besides here on Treasure Island, they owned a motel on St.
St.
Pete
Pete
Beach.
Beach.
Casa?
Yes.
Casa, how do you say
I
that?
don't
Yeah.
know.
But the Art Villa, that was here.
Yes. I think Mrs. Powell was in real estate.
Oh, she was, did their
I
parents?
believe it
Were
was.
they in real estate? Okay. Oh, the two motels, you think that
Yes.
would be keeping them busy enough, wouldn't you?
How about storms or anything? Do you remember any hurricanes that came through? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably, many close calls we've had. I think probably the most afraid that people were was the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban crisis. Because we were so close here. I remember it was on a weeknight, and for whatever reason, many of my friends were going to the same church, and we were all just saying our goodbyes because we just knew that,
Wow.
we were not going to make it through that. So that's probably, I remember being more afraid of that than any storms that we had here. I was in
Cuban
her,
Missile Crisis.
yes,
Mhm.
and
You
I
read about that?
yes, and I went through Hurricane Donna on the East Coast. So of course we've had the near misses of Charlie and all of those here, but I don't remember too many.
Now, when you, how old were you when you came here?
14.
Okay. So did you ride a bus to school or anything?
I rode a bus, picked us up on the end of the street, took us to Madeira Beach until high school, and then I got rides.
Did you have to get off the bus on the old Johns Pass Bridge and walk across it?
Not John's Pass, because we went from Madeira to
Oh, okay.
Madeira, but that same thing happened in Madeira. There was
Tell us a little about
there was a
that.
lady that would be on one side of the, as I remember, and it happened when I first came here, and then I think they got the new bridge there, but they would stop traffic, let the bus across until the kids were across, and then went back.
So that was, well, I guess the old, what do you call that, the old Madeira Beach?
That's the old
Crossway,
Madeira
or-
Beach, yes.
Yeah.
But I
You
have
find a
a
photo of that, wouldn't it?
real close high school friend, Betsy Burrow, who lived in Madeira, but her mother had one of the Miss Betsy in John's Pass and Treasure Island, and
boat?
the boat, fishing boat. So her daughter, she was the one that ran the boats, and so her daughter and I used to hang out with all, watch the fishermen come in with all the fish and all that.
Was that a John's Pass? They
Yes,
called it
John's Pass.
The Miss Betsy.
Miss Betsy
No, I've heard of that one. And what was the family that owned it?
Burrows.
Oh, Mr. Burroughs was quite a captain in the area, I think.
They moved down, oh goodness, from I think Arkansas, but because they still have, she's the only, her mother passed away, and she still has land in Arkansas, lives in California, still has the house that the original house in Madeira Beach, right on the beach, that she's remodeled and
Really?
and all that. Her mother was one of the boat captains there.
How about dances? Did you go to any dances?
Yes. Went to the suntan there on Treasure Island, and my group of friends, my girlfriends, were dating or boyfriend, girlfriend with a group from Pass Grill. So that was where everybody met, on the dances there. And I think there was another one in St. Pete Beach.
There was.
There was, yes.
I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah,
There
back in
certainly
there
was.
somewhere. And of course, the Beach Theater was.
The Impacts talked about that when we interviewed them. They played there,
Yes.
maybe once, maybe twice,
Yeah.
but they played
One
there.
of the impacts was in our class, not our class,
Oh,
it
who
went to
was that?
Seminole. Angelo, Jay Angelo,
Oh.
yes.
Yeah, we have him on tape.
Do you?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a really good interview, yeah. They were a lot of fun.
And they came back to our reunion a couple years ago.
Did they play?
Yes, they played.
Good.
You know, I didn't realize his involvement with Dick Clark,
Yes,
and I mean, it was pretty historic. Yeah.
Well, growing up here too, we went to a Star Spectacular Clearwater that a lot of the, that was kind
Wow,
of a big,
you did that.
that was really going somewhere big as if you went to Star Spectacular in Clearwater Beach, or is on the mainland, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess, was it Friday night dances, or they used to have on Treasure Island?
Yes.
Yeah. And they'd dance in the sand?
Uh-huh. And that same building, I guess, that's there.
Eatonville Beach?
Yes.
And the roof would get so hot that they couldn't do it anymore.
Like, ironically, my daughter went to Seminole High School. She became involved in student council, and she and a couple of her others in student council had the southeast, I guess, southwest student councils of all the area of Florida, and they were in Tampa. And then she contacted Treasure Island and had probably 8 buses of kids that came over to Treasure Island many of them had never even seen the beach. They had nighttime volleyball. This was probably back in 94, like 1994.
I bet that was fun.
But it was, the buses caravanned all the way to downtown Tampa. But it was, it brought back a lot of memories to me because right there was, and they were dancing, but they did a lot of beach stuff too. And thought, here it is, how many years later?
Yeah, that's your child. Yeah, the beaches were when you got here when you were 14, but even at that time, it was really a slow pace, wasn't it?
Oh,
Do you remember,
yes.
There was hardly any traffic.
No
and
traffic.
You could park anywhere you wanted. Nobody was hassling. It was really
Right.
different, wasn't it?
Yes. And you could walk. I mean, my
And you could
friends and
walk.
I would walk from 140th down to the Bath Club and not think anything of it, or, yeah.
And were you members of the Bath Club?
No, but I was a minister's daughter, so they let me.
Yeah, huh?
I think we were, yes.
That was quite a place in the state too, wasn't it?
That's
The Bath Club
yes, it
sure
was.
was.
Yes, it
I
was.
mean, wow.
So you had to be a little more proper, I suppose, in that day than the average. So you didn't hang out at Sunset Beach too much, huh?
Well, I had 2 younger brothers, and as they grew up and became teenagers, they were out to show the beaches that they were not ministers.
Oh, they were. They made a point of it.
So
funny.
I think it was harder on them than it was on me.
And how about your mom? Was she a stay-at-home mom, or did she?
Oh, she was. She stayed home,
Okay.
but she worked with my dad
Oh,
at church
sure, yes.
and had led the Sunday school, and she was always busy.
Right,
Yes.
yeah, I'm sure she would be.
Yes.
So you lived in the house that was provided by the church.
Yes.
That's still there to this day, isn't it?
It's there, but they sold it
Oh,
during the time that my parents there. They
Yeah.
bought it very cheap at the 1961, and then they went to a condo until he retired. So
Is that house? Is that the adobe-looking house, kind of the same as the church?
No.
Oh.
It was off by Crystal Island.
Oh, okay.
Back in there, yeah. But my dad was very active with the Treasure Island, and he was a volunteer fireman, so they were up and down the beaches all the time, yes, as well.
And did they work, the firemen, did they work at the firehouse on TI or Madeira? Or
I think they were all together. I mean, it was mainly a volunteer, and
Okay.
I know we had in our house when the emergency, whatever it was, went off, and he would take off, and unless it was Sunday morning.
So yes, as a volunteer, he wouldn't be
Yes.
in the firehouse.
But
That's
then
right. They
my
would be
mother and brothers and I
call.
would follow him and say,
Where's
what's
the fire?
happening here?
Yeah.
And so we did many of those.
Well, Madeira Beach was quite a fisherman's area there, and predominantly fishermen. And your father blessed the fleet every year, didn't
Yes, he did.
he? Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Are there photos of that?
I believe so.
That would be
Yes.
amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. And he did that for pretty much the whole time he was there?
He did.
Does anyone do that now?
Yes,
They do? Do they
I
still do it?
believe the previous minister did that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
C.C. Rice talks a lot about diving that bridge, you know, and
Oh yes.
and yeah,
My husband did that too. They, dove
Got a
under
lot
the
of-
current.
yeah, a lot of
He
current.
says we were crazy.
Crazy. Especially
That
the
was
boys.
one of the areas, though, they stopped the buses and all the kids
Yes,
had
they
to
did.
walk out
Yes.
because the pilings were just kind of moving on that
Yes.
thing.
So they did need a new bridge.
Oh,
Oh, it was
yeah,
scary. It
bad.
was scary.
Yeah, yeah. Great.
Yeah. The seafood festival has taken on quite a different
Right.
look now. Yes.
I guess when they were on Lagoon Lane, the church was on Lagoon Lane at the Union Hall there were quite a few people, fishermen,
Yes.
might come in, no socks, no shoes, whatever they
Yes.
had. It was
Well, one of the interesting things about the church was that as it became more of a larger building, the top of the church, they call it the Duck Church. I think you may have heard. It's been quite national because the steeple has 4 round circles, and the space is east, west, north, and south. And the story goes that they built it that way so that it would be looking at the 4 corners, the 4 corners of the compass. And on top of that was a long 20-foot staff, I believe it was 20 foot, with a light bulb, big light. And the story went that the light would stay on until every fisherman came in
Wow.
John's Pass. And then, if everybody was in safe, and then they would turn it off. But they would say, oh, somebody's still out there. Then they would gather and so, yeah. And then since then, a cross is there. And so the fisherman was very
It's a
important.
great story.
Yeah.
Yes, they were, weren't they?
that is a great story.
Yes, it really
Yeah.
is.
Do we have any pictures of that light and that staff?
Yes.
That's not on the steeple now, is it?
Not now.
Yeah.
It may be, it's in the writings that I have. I don't know. I may have stopped
Oh,
it before
cool.
that, but I can certainly give you
Yeah,
that.
boy, I'd like to have some.
Yeah.
And what would the years had been for that? Like, when they
Probably
would do
more like 49.
that? Okay, like
Yes.
40. Wow, that's a great story. And your dad was there then, right?
Not then.
Not
that
then,
was
not
just
yet.
prior to, yeah.
Okay. So that was Reverend Ralph. Was he still there
No.
then? Okay.
Well, his son was probably there
Okay.
then, yes.
Yeah.
And Reverend Ralph and his wife are buried at the front, in front of the church.
Oh, they
there.
are? Oh, I didn't know that.
And was he the first? Or?
Yes,
I'll be
So he's the one who started the one on
yes,
Treasure Island.
yes.
Wow.
And would get Leon Atkinson to
Uh-huh.
sweep out all those
Yes.
beer bottles on
And
Sunday
he
morning.
would go, well, there's one really nice lady that's still there, and she remembers that she was probably about 11 or 12, and he just went to every house, knocked on the door, and said, we're going to have church at the Fisherman's Hall. I'd love for you to be there. And it was made up of 20 different denominations. It was not it was not a,
Non-denominational. Yeah. Wow, that's neat.
Well, we sure appreciate you sharing that history with us, and we were just fascinated when we heard about Fisherman's Hall.
Yes.
We just didn't know anything about it until Leon Atkinson talked about it. And I'm
I would
so
love
glad
to
you-
talk to him too
Well,
sometime.
that would be great. We should do it. Everybody get together
Yeah.
with an interview. Wouldn't that be fun?
You know what's interesting about Leon talks about the Fisherman Hall, and during the week when it was the restaurant bar type thing, his father had a payphone. And it was one of the old dial type payphones, and you put a quarter or a dime in it or something, whatever it was. And they would unplug it and they'd put it out on the counter there. And one of the things that upset his father so much is that somebody stole it.
Oh, and I believe his father was a Sunday school teacher there.
That's all right.
Yeah, and there are pictures of Leon. If I'm not sure if his father or Leon? So,
Wayne Atkins.
Wayne. Yes, that's his father. Yes.
Yeah.
And my father knew him. Yes. And
We'll have to get that photo, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right, Kathy, well, we sure appreciate you
You're
coming
welcome.
here and sharing this with us and helping us put all these pieces together.
Good
for
luck with
the
your
Tales of Treasure Island.
adventure here
Thank
and the
you.
project.
Well, we've learned a lot, and we sure do appreciate y'all sharing all
A
this.
lot of I had forgotten a lot of this, and it just kind of bubbled up when you
Cool.
started talking about the beaches and how neat it was. But
It
we're
was
so
neat.
blessed to have lived on this area.
Totally, 100%, absolutely.
I do remember the Johns Pass Bridge and where it used to be.
Where it used to be.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed the history and the tales of Treasure Island. There's more to come. We have over 57 hours of the tales of Treasure Island. So as soon as we can get them to you, we will. Thanks for watching Tales of Treasure Island.